Hello everybody, Andrew Field here. Got a lot of news to cover. A lot of events have happened lately, so I'll try not to make the video too long. Let's get into it. So, into international affairs, there was a coordinated drone strike that happened that knocked out half of Saudi Arabia's oil capacity, more than 5 million barrels a day, or 5% of the world's oil supply. The oil prices shot up as a result, and there was fear of military confrontation. The Yemen Houthi rebels claimed responsibility. U.S. officials said that Iran or Iraq was more likely. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo publicly blamed Iran for, he said, an unprecedented attack on the world's energy supply. Evidence may, okay, they were saying that evidence may show that Yemen rebels were the ones responsible, but Yemen rebels were supported by Iran, and the Saudi-led coalition says weapons that were used were Iranian, and very probable the cruise missiles were launched from an Iranian base. Investigation happened, and much of the world was waiting for the results. Um, Iran dismissed the U.S. claim it was behind a Saudi oil strike, says they are ready for war against America, which they would obviously lose. Trump again said the U.S. was locked and loaded. The Pentagon chief briefed Trump about considering a response to Iran, as Trump does not put blame on Iran over the Saudi oil attack. He said he didn't want to go to war with Iran. Iran closes negotiations with the U.S. The U.S.'s response was delayed until Pompeo returned from a trip from Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. I was saying that the U.S. should not let Iran get away scot-free with the oil attack, which they did, and I think also the United Nations did a bad job of not holding Iran accountable. Trump later on said something in the UN General Assembly about Iran, like, getting more restrictions if they were to continue this behavior, but I think that's a major attack that they just got away with, and I think that was a very big mistake. I think a strike should have been to lay down the law and make an example of Iran. Presidential candidate Tulsi Gabbard said to Trump on Twitter that he's letting Saudi Arabia have control, and I agree that it's like not necessarily a part of his America First policy, getting involved in world affairs, but of course that's what America is about, and that's what he's doing, and he's just helping his allies. He's not letting Saudi Arabia take control, and so I was saying that Trump was right and Gabbard was wrong. The U.S. forces are working with Iraqi forces to take out remaining ISIS fighters because the coward ISIS members try to blend in with the regular population. Airfares to Hong Kong plunged amid the Hong Kong protests. A partial shutdown of the city airport. Israel's main two parties were neck and neck for presidency. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau wore brownface during a school event in 2001. He apologized. Russia captured North Korean vessels and a crew of over 200 that were fishing in their waters because they claim that, because Russia's like almost communist or authoritarian, and they were saying that they should be the only ones to get economic beneficial, any sort of benefit economically in their area of land and sea, and just because the North Korean fishers went over there to try to get some fish maybe for themselves and their families, they captured them. So that was pretty disturbing. It wasn't captured too much in the news. There was a sad event where 163 dolphins washed ashore in the Cape Verde Islands. China's Communist Party is now in power a year longer than the USSR was. Major clashes erupted in Hong Kong today, ahead of China's National Day, which I think, oh, I hate China. Um, Police spread tear gas. Protesters fought back. 13 people were hospitalized with injuries. A day before, tens of thousands rallied, to celebrate the fifth anniversary of the start of the Umbrella Movement, which is like the start of the protests in Hong Kong. China on Tuesday is having a parade to celebrate 70 years of communist rule, um, which I think, America needs to take a stand here. We're a country that represents, the biggest democracy of the world, and they're having a military parade celebrating 70 years of communism, which is not allowing any freedom. They limit even the internet, whatever they see, and the people don't have any say there in that country. And President Xi took off term limits, and they try to expand their territory with the artificial islands, and China's just a mess, and it's been kind of hard because, in my opinion, I want the world to get an agreement over climate change because I see that as our biggest threat and number one priority. But at the same time, our difference in government between Russia, America, and China make it very hard, and it'd be very hard for me to get along with China and Russia because of these differences, and just how they limit freedom so much, and that pisses me off. So that'd be hard for me, but I guess you got to do what needs to be done. But I think more pressure needs to be stepped up on China and Russia. People just worry because it's a risky move, but that's what I would do. Um, and I would have Ukraine, Taiwan, and Hong Kong as official allies, saying that if they were to invade those areas or try to get involved too much in those areas, that the U.S. would get involved militarily. Okay, so here's the big news. Trump repeatedly pressed Ukraine's president to investigate Biden's son and Biden. A whistleblower in the White House sent a complaint on Trump's dealings with a foreign leader, the president of Ukraine. He got information from multiple U.S. officials that a phone call was made in July where Trump urged Volodymyr Zelensky 8 times to work with Rudy Giuliani on a probe to knock out his 2020 opponent Joe Biden. The president says the call was perfectly fine and routine, which is bull. Joe Biden accused Trump of abuse of power over pushing Ukraine to investigate him because he was using his power as the president of the United States to push a foreign country, Ukraine, using leveraged military aid that was passed by Congress, $250 million, days before the call, to say, well, I'll give you this military aid that was already passed by another branch of government in exchange for helping to get rid of Joe Biden by trying to find criminal activity that they were doing in your country to get him out of the running before the votes count. That's obstruction. White House officials tried to lock down the information of the phone call, knowing how damning it was. The White House restricted access to Trump's calls to Putin and the Saudi prince. Democrats want to look into Trump's calls to foreign leaders, especially Putin. And even before I heard this, like his private meetings with Putin and everything, it's like him being buddy buddy with Putin and that whole. I think he was guilty. First off, on the stuff with Russia. Now, I think after with this inquiry, I don't know if they should go into that. I think they should stick on Ukraine, like people are saying, but I think he's guilty on that. He was it shows treason that he was getting involved with Russia on the 2016 elections. But listen to this. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov told reporters he hoped conversations with Putin would remain private, and he said the release of the call with Zelensky was quite unusual. And this is Kremlin spokesman saying that he didn't want the conversations with Trump to get out. Now, why would that be? maybe the treason. Bingo, that's what I think, because I think that they don't want that to get out because it's damning information of the interference in our 2016 election. They tried to interfere in our 2018 election. They're trying to interfere in our 2020 election. And if we have ground evidence of that in these phone calls, then the U.S. is going to do everything it can to stop them from interfering in our elections. And I think that that's a great way that they're dividing our country apart, which is what they're trying to do, to get involved, in our political system without getting into war directly. And they're actually doing a pretty good job of it. But I think that those calls are necessary to look into to prove once and for all that they were getting involved in our elections, and Trump was too buddy buddy with stupid Putin and Russia, and yeah, I think they would prove it once and for all and would get them out of our elections. The number 2 Senate Democrat, Dick Durbin, said that he would support an impeachment inquiry on Trump, along with hundreds of ex-national security officers, and House Republican Mark Amodei supported the impeachment inquiry, not impeachment. And then, since I think reports came out saying that he was the first House Republican supporting the impeachment inquiry, he was like backing off, because he's a coward. But he was just trying to be more broad. Whatever. The Republicans are stupid. You'll figure it out later. The sources were saying that Pelosi is preparing House action. She met with 6 committee chairmen to talk strategy for a broader meeting with all Democrats. Chris Murphy was supporting impeachment inquiry, and that ended negotiations with the White House on background checks. And then Pelosi announced a formal impeachment inquiry of Trump. Trump accused the Democrats of presidential harassment for doing their jobs. Republicans raked in $15 million of donations over the impeachment threat. Rudy Giuliani was having a televised rage over Ukraine's affair. Republicans were mad at Giuliani for going in interviews because it was just sparking the storm more. Giuliani was at the center of the corruption. He met in Madrid with one of President Zelensky's advisors. State Department officials met with Giuliani to try to contain the damage to U.S. national security. Giuliani said the State Department told him to talk to Ukraine, and Giuliani said Pompeo told him he was aware of the Ukraine outreach. Biden urges TV networks to stop booking Giuliani, but in my opinion, I think they should, because Giuliani seems to give damning info on the interviews, which is just hurting Trump even more, which is the best medicine because that's his personal lawyer, and he's actually helping the opposing side. And then there was new information saying that Trump worked with 2 lawyers in addition to Giuliani to get dirt on Joe Biden with Ukraine. Um, and they were saying that like Chris Murphy, warned Ukraine not to get involved in the 2020 elections, but honestly, like the Ukraine was a perfect target because Russia is like invading Ukraine, so they really need that military aid. So that's why he was halting it before the call. And the person Zelensky is younger, like political person, so he's like kind of new to the whole thing. So when the most powerful country in the world comes to you, you're like more likely to listen and do whatever's needed to be done to stay allies with Trump and America, which makes it more damning. Um, Trump threatened an American deriving threatened an American during the call with Ukraine's leader. At the center of investigations, that person. Well, that was a part of the investigation. That he threatened an American during his call with Ukraine's leader. Um, the GOP wants Nadler off of Judiciary panel, chairman over impeachment probe. The Senate unanimously agreed for the whistleblower's complaint to be turned to the Intelligence Committee. Trump's intelligence chief threatened to resign if he was told to stonewall Congress, and that means like to not give valid answers. He ended up testifying about the explosive whistleblower complaint, but he said that he wouldn't talk about what he said with Trump. Schiff said there was an agreement reached with the whistleblower to testify with the House committee. The inspector general was stupid, saying that the whistleblower does not want Trump to get reelected. I mean, obviously, seeing the crimes that he's done. Trump tweeted the Democrats want to destroy the Republican Party, when that's exactly what he's doing. The White House released a transcript of the call that shows an impeachable offense. And turns out Trump released a transcript of the call against his senior official's opinion. And that's a big thank you, because that's concrete evidence of his corruption and how he could be impeached. Attorney General Barr was mentioned in the phone call but denied involvement, so he's probably going to be a part of the inquiry. Trump official accidentally sent the talking points to House Democrats, and they sent a follow-up to recall the email. The majority of Republican senators would vote to impeach if the vote was anonymous, because they're all cowards. More Republicans and Americans are swaying towards the impeachment, or just the impeachment inquiry, like the investigation of impeachment. Senate Republicans are sticking with Trump because, again, they're cowards and they're weak. Trump, in a closed-door session, was pissed at the whistleblower. He called him a spy, and he said that he would have been killed for betraying him. The whistleblower is an American patriot and a hero. He's a patriot and a hero. Trump threw out Vice President Pence under the bus, and he told reporters to investigate him. He held a joint meeting with Ukraine President Zelensky. He said Pelosi is no longer Speaker of the House, which is just a lie. Adam Schiff said impeachment hearings could happen as early as next week. The U.S. envoy to Ukraine resigned amid the impeachment inquiry. The House panels subpoena Pompeo for Ukraine-related documents, and they hint at obstruction charges if he doesn't. Giuliani pulled out of the Kremlin-backed process. The Senate blocked Trump's emergency declaration, rebuking the president's attempt to fund the wall without Congress again. A Republican Michigan House Representative, Paul Mitchell, told a GOP member to get Trump to stop saying the four congressmen of color to go back where they came from at that time, and he was stunned by the Trump crowd spewing "stand her back." The Trump's cabinet did not set a meeting Mitchell wanted to have with the president to voice his concerns, so he decided that he wasn't running for a re-election in Congress because of Trump's repeated remarks of hate and division, and he wanted to stay in Congress for a long time. I appreciate Paul Mitchell for taking a stand. 18 House Republicans are resigning, which is a big deal because it could mean a Democratic House in 2022. A New York Times book reignited calls for Brett Kavanaugh's impeachment a week or two ago. The evidence has another woman, Deborah Ramirez, accusing Kavanaugh of sexual harassment. 7 people knew of the incident before it went public. A guy, Bill Mayer, says that going after Kavanaugh looks bad, and he was saying what were you like at 17? Which I think this claim's stupid, because it doesn't mean you can do whatever you want at 17, and you know that you shouldn't sexually harass someone at 17. The United Auto Workers, 48,000, went on strike against General Motors for higher wages, more generous health care, more job security, and Trump urges General Motors and the auto union to make a deal. He proposed an agreement that would reopen an assembly plant in Lordstown, Ohio. Federal Reserve cuts rates the second time in 2019. Top NRA officials knew Russia was using the NRA to bolster its status with lawmakers or Trump. The Democratic Finance Committee shows. New York prosecutors subpoenaed 8 years of Trump's tax returns. They wanted Trump's personal taxes and the Trump Organization taxes. The House Judiciary Committee testified ex-Trump aide Corey Lewandowski, the acting intelligence chief, refused to testify before, and he ended up testifying, as I said before. Gun control advocates were desperate to not have the Supreme Court rule on the biggest Second Amendment case of gun rights in a decade, because they're more conservative now, so they'd probably lean more towards gun rights instead of gun control rights. Trump went to a Baltimore campaign a couple weeks ago. He launched an ambitious play to turn New Mexico red. He spat at a poll, made him losing to leading Democrats Biden, Warren, Sanders, Harris, Buttigieg, and saying that 6 candidates led Trump in Texas. Trump's approval rating from a week or two ago was 38% overall, 30% among women. Bill de Blasio ended his presidential campaign. The 9/12 debate, I didn't see the whole debate, but everyone looked pretty good in it. Afterwards, Warren had a speech in New York City on the devastating effects of corruption. He didn't believe that more than 20,000 people attended her rally. Stephen Colbert had Warren on his show and Bernie Sanders, and then Kimmel had Joe Biden. I didn't know that Warren was a longtime Republican until 1996. 450,000 applied for Andrew Yang's $1,000 a month offer. The stakes are lower for candidates for an October debate. 11 candidates qualify. Billionaire Tom Steyer was set to debut on stage. I think it's a mistake that the qualifications were lower because candidates should be less and less instead of allowing people to come back the next month. The Working Party, Families Party, gave their support to Warren and they pledged support to Bernie in 2016. Pelosi said turning Texas blue is our hope for the future, and she said the impeachment inquiry is more important than political consequences. The first responsibility is to the Constitution, and I want to say she's awesome. A little while ago, 4 firefighters were injured, and a body was found at a scene of a California building fire. There was an explosion at a building in Maine. A Texas girl died from a brain-eating amoeba when she was swimming in a river. An idiot 18-year-old who just purchased an AK-47 told a coworker she wanted to shoot 400 people at her school for fun. Thankfully, the coworker relayed the information. The girl was arrested. She was suspended before for bringing a knife to school and was suspended for drawing swastikas on her personal belongings. The Trump border wall could destroy archaeological sites, and the National Park Service finds that that's what they found out. And then the drinking water, surveying 7.5 million Californians, has been contaminated with toxic PFAS. Greta Thunberg, a 16-year-old environmental activist from Sweden, said to a group of Senate Democrats they weren't trying enough to tackle the climate crisis. I mean, I feel like they were more than most in America, but I get what she's saying. Senator Ed Markey, chair of the task force and co-sponsor of the Green New Deal, said that he heard her message and the chamber would redouble our efforts to tackle the crisis, and the world needs their leadership. There's a lot of stuff. The massive global climate strike happened on September 20th. The UN Secretary General denounced the fossil fuel industry for boosting climate change. Trump went to the UN Climate Action Summit for 15 minutes. He was more focused on religious freedom, meeting with Pence. Greta Thunberg said the science has been clear for 30 years, saying that the politicians were failing us, and she said if you fail us, we will never forgive you. Greta and 15 others filed a complaint that the biggest economies are not doing enough to face climate change. UN report says the window to act is shrinking. 5 years to come should be the hottest years on record. Greta said the climate movement now is too loud to handle for Trump and critics. Trump had a speech at the UN General Assembly. It talked on global trade, China, a warning to Iran, and illegal immigration. He blamed Iran for the Saudi oil attack, and he seemed unenthusiastic while speaking. He said the Nobel Peace Prize Committee was against him because he will not get many Nobel Peace Prizes. Russia's foreign minister said of the West, U.S., and possibly Europe, that they're out of step with the times, and that speaking as the authoritarian government with no good allies. Iran's not even really an ally. The EPA is not allowing California to enforce more stringent greenhouse gas emissions standards on cars than the federal government. Forecasters are watching a trio of tropical storms. Melba threatened to flood portions of southeastern Texas. I don't think that's a problem now. So, the whole situation with Antonio Brown, his former trainer accused him of sexual assault. The NFL interviewed the accuser, Brittany Taylor. Antonio Brown got kicked off the Patriots for the investigation. Brown announced he was done from the NFL, despite teams looking at him, and he was going to Central Michigan University. And he's a dumbass. I mean, I'm glad he's not on the NFL anymore because despite him being one of the best in the league, he did all he could to screw over the Raiders and not play even though he was their star player because he knew that they weren't that good of a team. And it's just really disrespectful. There was a report that pedestrians die in every 90 minutes in the U.S. The Storm Area 51 event got canceled, 1,000 showed up, and one person got arrested. The Navy still tracks UFOs. The NASA chief scientist says they're close to discovering life on Mars, says the world isn't ready. Purdue Pharma filed for bankruptcy. Nintendo said that it's only putting Nintendo characters in the game, so characters like Iron Man and Goku aren't going to be in the game. Smash Bros. Rick Ocasek, the lead producer of the Cars, died. Trump's former press secretary, Sean Spicer, is on Dancing with the Stars. Montana got blanketed with 3 feet of snow before October. Governor Steve Bullock declared a state of emergency. The State Department ramped up probes into emails sent by former Hillary Clinton aides. The Russo brothers, directors of Avengers Endgame and others, said it's a tragic mistake on Sony's part, thinking they could replicate what Kevin Feige and the MCU did with Spider-Man. Marvel only got 5% profit from Spider-Man Far From Home, which made over $1 billion. Sony offered Marvel 30% but walked away. If Apple or Amazon bought Sony, Spider-Man would go back to the MCU. Sony CEO reportedly did not want to sell his company. Sony signed Spider-Man to one more MCU movie, which was good, but hopefully it should be more long-term. A walrus defending her cub sank a Navy boat in the Arctic Ocean. I think it was a Russian Navy boat. U.S. and Afghan forces killed over 20 Al-Qaeda members in a South Afghanistan raid. An MLB Pirates pitcher, Vasquez, was jailed on child solicitation and pornography charges. Pennsylvania State Senator Michael Former also was facing child pornography charges. Joe Madden was fired as the Cubs manager after the Cubs missed the playoffs. Had a 5-season run, 4 postseasons, 2016 world title. Abortion rates in the U.S. Fall to a 46-year low. Rate fell 20% from 2011 to 2017 as Republican-led states pursued anti-abortion regulations. Merriam-Webster added 530 new words to the dictionary. Some were shortened words of real words. 1 million kids in New York were allowed to skip school for climate protests. Former President, 94 years old, Jimmy Carter, said there should be an age limit on 80 for the President of the United States, which is respectable, but I think in some, a president shouldn't be able to be, a person shouldn't be able to be president when they're super old. But if they have the mental capacity, I think they should be okay, and good health. Voter registration day happened, so yeah, sorry for the really long video. I appreciate if you guys stood with me this whole video. The main things were the impeachment inquiry officially started by the Democrats and the global climate strike with over 7 million people attending that. If you guys like the video, please like and subscribe. I'll see you all later. Peace out.